So our final briefer is Dr. Kevin Geis, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Air Force. Dr. Geis, Dr. Geis is responsible for providing oversight and direction for all matters pertaining to the effective and efficient use of energy to support the global Air Force mission. He served in the United States Marine Corps, and for the past 20 years he has served in various leadership positions in both the Air Force and the Army, including a detail at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. In the Department of Army, Dr. Geis served as the Program Director for Energy Security. Along the way, he received his doctoral degree from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was in the field of zoology. Dr. Geis.
Thank you, Dr. Maibach. So it was actually 3 years ago tomorrow that I came to the Air Force from the Army, having spent 2 years there working energy issues. And I didn't really realize that until I looked at my watch a few minutes ago and said, oh my gosh, 21st tomorrow. We've come a long way in the 3 years that I've been there in the Air Force. I will also say that the progress that we've made in the last few years was built upon a foundation of work that had been done before I even got there. And there are actually some folks in the audience today that contributed to that. There are a few common themes that I think you've already heard and will continue to hear from those of us up here on stage, and how energy supports our missions. We as an Air Force, and I personally, don't care about energy for energy's sake. I care about energy and how it enables everything that we do in our Air Force to support our global mission to fly, fight, and win in air, space, and cyberspace for defense of our nation. Also, the Air Force this year won 5 Federal Energy Management Program awards, more than any other single service and federal agency in the federal government. So I think that each of us can kind of get up here and tout our department's achievements, but that's a good thing. I think that it's respectable that the military services individually are leading not only within the department, but also leading the federal government to find ways to be more energy efficient, reduce costs, reduce the amount of energy and fuel that it takes to do the job. We are expected to do our job and to accomplish our mission on a daily basis. And we're not expected to come forth with an excuse that would relate to energy and how that would limit our ability to accomplish that mission. And it was the same when I was in the Army, and it's the same now in the Air Force, and as Breon said, the same in the Navy. Also want to thank the folks here that have come out, the media, those of you from academia. We met with the Associate Dean a few minutes before we started, and he said he was heading off to do a PhD defense, and that brought back some memories for me. And I mentioned that I hope the guy brings cookies for the committee, because that will help to smooth things along. But I do get asked about my PhD, and of course it's in zoology. And clearly, if you want to be the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Energy, you need a PhD in zoology. But I think the point of having an advanced scientific degree, whatever it's in, whether it's zoology or biomechanical engineering or whatever it is, I think it's that development of a critical mind and learning how to ask questions. So regardless of what the technology is, I'm interested in what are the limitations. What are the assumptions that go into the use of this technology? How will we use it? How much will it cost? What's the energy input? All of those things that I think are fundamental to the rigor of a scientific advanced degree program. So it's not the topical area, but certainly as I've covered many scientific issues, it's that fundamental scientific perspective that I think has served me well in the last few years. Already messed it up, didn't I? Okay. I talked a little bit about the mission. I don't know what the mission of the Air Force conjures in your mind, and perhaps it's F-16s, perhaps it's Thunderbirds that won't be flying at air shows. But our mission is a global mission, and it could be humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, hauling all manner of cargo all around the world to support not only our missions as an Air Force, but also our service partners, our coalition partners. When you look at how we support things like hurricanes or severe weather disasters that happen around the world, what we bring to bear is not just what we have, but we may be hauling generators that come from an Army base or other assets, but we have a crucial role in supporting those operations. Our tankers that fly around the world don't just refuel Air Force planes, they also refuel our sister service aircraft as well as our coalition partners. So it's a global mission, and as I'll mention in a few minutes a little bit more, that also reflects how we approach energy and some of the solutions and challenges that we're trying to address and bring forth. The enterprise of the Air Force is very large in a number of dimensions. The number of aircraft that we have is 2 times the combined fleets of United Delta and Southwest. So we have a large fleet, and that's to think not only about the energy that's required, but also the costs of maintenance and sustainment of those aircraft. And if we can find ways that we can benefit both the energy consumption and usage of those aircraft, as well as the sustainment or maintenance costs of those aircraft, that's one area that we're trying to find some combined benefits. If you were to upgrade an engine to an aircraft, yes, maybe it's more energy efficient, but you may also get a greater benefit from reduced maintenance costs or other attendant benefits. As we look to our facilities, of course, Mr. Kidd gets the crown for the largest energy bill, but we also have a very large installation facility footprint in the Air Force. We spend over $1 billion a year just on electricity and energy to conduct our operations, to train people for hospitals and all other manner of activity on our installations, and that's a huge bill. Our vehicles, the combined DoD vehicle pool is over 200,000 or close to 200,000. We have about 80,000 in our fleet, and we're looking for opportunities to reduce our fuel consumption, petroleum fuel consumption, to increase and enhance the use of alternate fuels, as well as look for ways to incorporate newer technologies in our vehicle fleet, whether it's plug-in electric vehicles, et cetera. And then to do all that stuff, to operate, what does it take? And it, first of all, takes about $9 billion to pay that energy bill. So when I commented earlier about why do we care about energy, it's also the fact that it's about 8% of the total Air Force bill. So if you look at your personal budget and you saw what was taking up 8% of your personal bill, you'd probably pay attention to it as well and look for ways to get that bill down and to make sure that every dollar that you do spend addresses your personal mission and supports the needs that you have to support your family and the things that you want to do. Likewise, we believe that stewardship of the funds that we've been provided by the taxpayers to do our mission are appropriately focused on the priorities of the Air Force and looking for ways to be more efficient and reduce how many of those dollars have to be moved over to pay electricity or fuel bills. We use about 2.2 billion gallons of fuel a year, and that's our aviation fuel consumption. We're down to just about where we were in 2001, so prior to all the overseas operations that we had in the last 11 or so years. So this is about the level of fuel that maintained the ready Air Force at that time, not including any additional operations that came after that. Of course, we've been leading in the pursuit of aviation fuels, alternative aviation fuels, whether it's synthetic or biofuels, and our primary focus has been on certification of the fuel. So I've been asked before, why do we care about alternate fuels? Why are we pursuing alternate fuels? How does that fit into our mission set that I've been talking about? I don't have the slide in here, but I've shown a slide before that shows a picture of the side of a C-17 aircraft. And in that picture, it has some text. And it's basically the placard on the side of the C-17 that tells you the aircraft type. It tells you the serial number for the aircraft. And then just below that, it gives you a list of fuels that aircraft is approved to fly on. And a C-17 cargo aircraft, which is actually in the top right of this picture here, can fly on 12 different types of fuel. Now that's not because we want to fly on 12 different types of fuel, or at any given time we're putting 5 or 6 different types of fuel in the aircraft, But the bottom line is, because we have a global mission, that we need to make sure that wherever we land, or wherever we operate, that the fuel that's available, that we can use that. So as we looked towards what aviation fuels may be on the market, Mr. Paez talked a little bit about potential price competitiveness in the United States. Well, that's one piece of it. But as we operate in South America and Africa and other parts around the world where these fuels may come into the market sooner than here, and may be cost competitive in other areas of the world, we just want to make sure that we can use it. It's not switching from one fuel to another. It's adding to that list of fuels that we have the options to use it. In fact, those 12 that are already listed, the current fuels, either the Fischer-Tropsch or the HRJ, hydrotreated renewable jet fuels, those wouldn't even have to be added to the list specifically, because the commercial specifications for Jet A, which is your commercial jet fuel, already includes those. So the list doesn't even get any longer. It just allows us to use those fuels that may be available. We also deal with, on the cost side, on the budgeting side, and year of execution, the volatility of fuel prices has also caused us some challenges, not in a mission sense, but certainly in a business sense, as we execute our budget every year. And as we, in the blue bars on the slide here, represent what the planning factor was that we were provided to put into our budgets 2 years before we got to that year of execution. And then the amber bar are the bars are the prices that we experienced in those years as to what the actual prices were, or the range of those prices. So you can see that if you plan towards a $3.12 fuel price, and prices go up, even if your consumption stays the same, that puts significant pressure fiscally on you in a year of execution. We have made tremendous progress in our aviation fleet in getting our fuel consumption down. We had a goal of reducing our aviation fuel consumption 10% by 10% by 2016. This is our new fuel, our new goal that relates to energy efficiency. But we, in fact, beat that 10% fuel consumption reduction goal and achieved a 12.4% fuel consumption reduction by fiscal year 2012. We've since changed our focus now to look at becoming more efficient in how we fly, because at the end of the day, we don't necessarily control how much we fly. We don't control what disasters are going to occur around the world and when we're going to get the call to go support either an operation or a disaster. So we don't control that op tempo, as we would call it, the operations tempo. But for every flight that we do conduct, we can look at ways to be more efficient and more effective in that. Technology is also in the DNA of the Air Force. Our service was founded on a new technology and a new concept of operations of how to incorporate that technology into warfare. And fundamentally, what we're looking for in the future is how can we improve and enhance and integrate advanced technologies into our weapon systems. Of course, for the Air Force, our biggest focus is on aviation systems. So getting to an advanced engine that perhaps can give us 25% energy efficiency on that platform, or increased thrust, et cetera, can not only address energy efficiency, but that thrust can also be, or payload thrust can also be translated into enhanced payload, enhanced range, et cetera. So across the board, technology is something that we certainly value in the Air Force to help us move forward and address our energy requirements. Beyond technology, some things that we're also looking at is in how we fly. So it's been well known that as an aircraft moves through the air, that behind the aircraft are these vortices that are produced off the wingtips. We've been doing experiments that show that formation flying, where a trailing aircraft can actually, like calling it surf on those vortices, take advantage of that aerodynamic lift and reduce the amount of fuel for the conduct of the aviation operations in that trailing aircraft. So it's not just about new engines, it's also looking at concepts of operations and how we fly. As well, we're looking at renewable energy and clean energy in general, in pursuit not only of how it would address the overall government initiatives and goals for renewable and clean energy, but also, as my colleagues have stated, how does it fit into the business case for a particular base? if it makes sense financially to do that renewable energy project, then we can both meet goals of fiscal responsibility as well as addressing priorities as it relates to clean energy. On our facilities, we continue to reduce our energy consumption and enhance our energy efficiency. Our energy intensity itself is down 3% since 2003, and that is the energy consumption per square foot. The last P chart I want to show also is because of our reduction of our energy consumption, and that's the brown bar, our brown trace that goes down, we've been able to keep our energy, our electricity and utility costs relatively stable over the last few years because we continue to get our absolute level of consumption down. If we had not reduced that consumption, our electric and utility bill would actually have been going up the last few years. And then the last element that I'll mention before I sit down and take your questions is that of culture. We have long stated that one of our goals in the Air Force and the Air Force Energy Program is to help make energy a consideration in all that we do. We're working with our Air Education and Training Command, and they have done a full scrub of all of the education and training programs across the Air Force to help us identify where we can appropriately address energy consumption and utilization in those training programs. Because whether you are an aircraft maintainer, whether you are an admin specialist, a fireman, whatever your job is, energy enables what you do in some way. And one of our goals is to ensure that we appropriately address how energy is used in that job. So if you work in a maintenance shop and you have a piece of test equipment, does that piece of test equipment need to be on 24 hours a day? Or perhaps there's a 2-hour warm-up period that's appropriate for ensuring that that test equipment works appropriately. Another example is in a painting operation where what they showed was they didn't have to have the temperature and humidity at the exact same set point every day of the year, only to have it ready to go and prepared for when the aircraft actually shows up to be painted, just like they do in the auto industry. And they save hundreds of thousands of dollars on their electric bill for that facility by allowing the temperature and humidity to vary on days that weren't critical for the painting operations. So there are a lot of opportunities that we can pursue in just changing how we do things, raising awareness, and getting people getting airmen to understand how they can implement these in their jobs. And it's more than just turning off lights and changing your thermostat set point, but actually the conduct of your everyday job, they have opportunities. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Geis. So I'm going to take the moderator prerogative and ask the first question at the 60,000-foot level, then we'll go to journalists for questions. And my question has to do with sort of a future legacy issue. So when you gentlemen are 30 years hence, as you're beginning to consider retirement, and future historians are asking you the question of the early years of this initiative, what was the single most important, what proved to be the single most important thing in what you are currently doing?
I'll take that. I think in the context of the work that we're doing with aviation operations. And I'll give you a little vignette. When I was working in the Army, just before Richard arrived, we would have our senior energy council. So it's when the general officers and the assistant secretaries get together and we talk about energy. And usually, as we discuss things, folks would tend to turn and look down the table at the general in charge of installations. Because that was where a lot of the fuel usage was. We hadn't evolved to, I think, fully appreciate the role of the operational side in the G4, but at that time, a lot of the focus was on the installations. I moved to the Air Force, and we have a similar governance structure, a senior energy council, and you have the generals and the assistant secretaries sitting around the table. And we talk about energy, and because most of it is aviation, there's really no one person that anybody can look at because, first of all, everybody at some point supports aviation. And second of all, if they don't know anything about it, certainly they're not going to admit they don't know anything about aviation energy usage. So the dynamic is very different. So to get to your point, I think part of, hopefully, our legacy of my office and my staff and the leadership in the Air Force, the Secretary and the Undersecretary, would be that we changed the culture, that we got those pilots, the folks involved in aviation, to think about how they do their job and how improving the way that we utilize energy can actually enhance our ability to get the mission done. So it's not necessarily putting in a piece of technology or putting in a renewable energy project. I think it's if we have that ability to change how we view, we think about and implement energy across the board, particularly in aviation operations, that would be something that I think in 30 years we should be able to look back and say, okay, that really made a difference.
Either if you'd like to address that question.
I mean, a question of legacy, that's a pretty personal question. I mean,
Not personal legacy, programmatic legacy.
I think there's two things. One, all of the services during the last, this isn't a service-specific issue, but I think all of the services collectively have changed the way we value energy, energy security, and the realization of the impact on its mission. That has occurred the last 3 years across the Department of Defense, and I'm pleased to have been part of that transformation. I think a more immediate is that the Army Energy Initiatives Task Force is right now the largest renewable energy project pipeline in the country. And if we're able to keep that up and that we're able to demonstrate the ability to leverage a long-term demand signal with land and solid business practices, we should be able to continue to drive down the costs of renewables. We're part of that downward pressure, and continue to make the business case for even more deployment of renewables, not only in the Army, but on other lands and facilities across the country. So I think that has the potential to be noted as, at least a minor footnote someplace a few years from now.
I open it up to questions from the media. Sorry, Aaron.
Aaron Meadow with Defense News. Everyone's talking about their own specific services. Are there DoD-wide projects, and how much coordination is there between your offices on these issues?
So the answer is yes. There's significant coordination across the department, as well as individual service efforts. And I think a lot of that has to do with the differences between the service endowments and missions. So the Army and the Marine Corps are absolutely cooperating on all things soldier power and forward operating base out there. The Marine Corps technology comes to the Army, it goes back to the Marine Corps, and vice versa. And so that's because we face the same sort of challenges in the battle space. Similarly, on the installation side, there's lots of coordination in terms of best practice of uniform facility criteria, for example, how to build better buildings, etc. But the Navy and the Air Force, I don't want to speak to them, they have a much larger liquid fuel budget than the Army, and they are naturally in the lead on that, and the Army's following, and that seems to make a lot of programmatic sense.
I think the biggest change for all of us is, Kevin, when we had different meetings, we invite each other now, and there's more of, instead of it being an individual service, it's how can this company, how can this technology benefit all the services. Just driving over here, that we were talking about a program in regards to a project that we're working on. And again, it's not an Air Force project, it's not an Army project, it's the three sister services together trying to figure out what's best for the department. I think our office was newly created. There wasn't really a gas and energy office when I came on board. And now we have a deputy assistant secretary. Actually, our deputy assistant secretary was promoted to be undersecretary, so we have a vacancy. But these gentlemen would always get together for lunch. They're talking over there, calling each other. So, and you see that also at the next highest levels, where the assistant secretaries, I think, are more involved. And so now it's not looking at, with our limited budgets, how can the Navy solve this issue, or how can we do this? It's okay. We all have a limited budget. How can we all work together to move all our goals forward? And I think that's been the biggest change I've seen for the past 3.5 years in the office.
So to answer your question, not only do we interact with each other, but also with the facilities folks at OSD and the operational energy folks. Certainly in some areas like alternate fuels, the Operational Energy Plans and Programs Office is the designated lead for the department. So even though we have some initiatives, they lead the policy and the direction on that. There are also some programs specific in DoD. So the Environmental Security Testing Certification Program, ESTCP, when Dr. Robine was here, she worked hard to bolster that and build that up to help test bed projects within the Department of Defense. And of course, if you're going to do that, then you need to do it at a military installation, so we are natural partners as it relates to some of those ESTCP programs.